What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, continuing our series on getting started with SketchUp Pro by teaching you how to create doors and windows in today's video. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so I will link to this full series in the notes down below so that you have access to all of this, including the downloadable floor plan. You can check that out by visiting the SketchUpEssentials.com/floorplan in order to download the image and follow along. And so up to this point, what we've done is we've gone through and we've modeled out all of our interior and exterior walls, right? So I can toggle these walls on and off. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my shadows off just for performance's sake, like this, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on this house model. And so what I want to do is I want to add doors and windows. And so to do that, there's a very specific way that you can do this that's going to get you a few benefits. And so the very first thing that you want to do with something like a door is you want to start by modeling out the frame. And you can kind of see the frame from our 2D floor plan right here. But generally speaking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the R key. So I'm going to mouse over this right here, and I'm going to draw a rectangle across this surface. So notice how this wall is grouped, so this geometry is not merging with this geometry. That's one of the reasons that we group geometry. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to create my frame. And so to do that, I'm going to use the offset tool. So I'm going to tap the F key on my keyboard to activate that tool, mouse over this surface, and then offset this in. And in this case, we're going to say that the frame has a thickness of 2 inches. Now, before we do anything else, notice how we have a problem in the sense that this offset this in all the way like this. We don't necessarily need that. So usually what I'll do is I'll just take this line, I'll just move it directly down like this. Make sure that it's straight down. So tap the M key, and then you want to make sure that you're on that blue axis, and you can just drag it to the ground right here. Then you should be able to tap the E key, click and drag across this to erase it. And so now what I want to do is I want to take this frame profile that we've created and I want to pull it back to the thickness of our wall like this. Now if you want to get a little bit more in depth with your frames or something like that, you could definitely pull them out in order to give them a little bit of thickness or add things like trim. We're not going to worry too much about that for this video, but it's definitely something that you can do. But what I want to do is now I've created all of this geometry and it's raw geometry. Well, we want to take this raw geometry and we want to drop it in a group, or more technically a component. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag a box across this, right click, and click on Make Component. And so when you make this a component, pay a little bit of attention to the way that you're labeling this, because the way that you're labeling this is going to show up in your outliner over here, which we'll check out in a second. But in this case, I want to be a little bit descriptive. So in this case, I'm just going to call this door dash 3 foot by 7 foot like this. And you want to make sure the box for replace selection with component is complete. And I want to create this. Well, now if we go look in our outliner, notice how we've got our walls groups. I've got my default model group, and then I've got a component for a door 3 foot by 7 foot. And so right now though, we don't have all of the detail that we need. So what I'm going to do is within each door, I usually try to put in 3 elements. I try to put in a frame, a door leaf, and then a door swing, which is the visual indicator that you can use in 2 dimensions if you export this to layout. And so to do that, we need to go inside of this group. So we're going to double click on this object right here. The very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this frame, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to group it inside of this door. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click to rename this, and I'm just going to call this frame right here. So now I've got a frame object within this door component. Well, I also want to model a leaf in here. And so you could either model this closed or open. I'm going to probably model it open, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to model out my door leaf. So in this situation, right, my opening for the door is going to be 2 foot 8. So I want to draw a 2 foot 8 inch line. I want to give this thickness right here. So we're going to give it a thickness of probably 2 inches again. You would go with whatever your door thickness or your door leaf thickness is. And I'm just going to draw this as a rectangle right here. And so what I want to do is I want to push pull this up like this. So now what I've got is I've got a door leaf in here. And you could model this open or closed. It works either way. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But I'm just going to right click on this. I'm going to make this a group. And then within my outliner, I'm going to label it door dash leaf like this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tag these. And in this case, so that you can see the swing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate this so that it's closed. So I'm just going to use the rotate tool by tapping Q. I'm going to tap the up arrow key. I'm going to click to set a base point. Click to rotate it. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like this. So I've got my door leaf in here, which I can toggle on and off. I've got my door frame, which I can toggle off. But I still want to draw this two-dimensional piece right here. So I'm going to draw this out. We're going to call it 2 foot 8 inches right here. And we're just going to model the profile of this door leaf. And then we're going to draw an arc like this. So the arc is just going to be the two-dimensional indicator of the direction that the door is going to swing. And I'm going to take all of that. I'm going to right click and I'm going to put that in a group. I'm going to right click on that group and we're going to call this door swing right here. So now I've got a door that's made up of 3 pieces. And in a lot of cases, what we can do is we can reuse these doors. And so technically these are in here as pocket doors, but for this one, let's go ahead and let's reuse it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode. And I'm going to copy this across right here. So just M key, click, and then tap Control on your keyboard in order to go into copy mode. But now I've got 2 doors in here. Now, one thing that you usually want to do when you're modeling this way is you want to name them. And so right now these have the same name, right? And notice how the name that they have in here is within brackets. That's indicating that the actual component definition of the door is called door 3 foot by 7 foot. But each door can also have its own unique name as well. So in this case, I'm going to call this door 1. And so what I can do is that I can go up into my component info right here. And notice how I have an option not only for my definition name, but also my instance name. And so in this case, this instance of the door is going to be called D1. We're going to hit the enter key. I'll notice how when we do that, now I get the D1 in here, and then I get the component definition. So for this one, I would call that D2 right here. And so what we can do is we can use this to name our doors. Note that if you have more than 10 doors, you're going to want to call this door 01 and 02, just so that your naming actually kind of lines up in here. But the other thing I want to do is I want to create tags for each one of these things. So in this case, I want to create a tag and I'm going to call it doors dash overall. I'm going to create a tag called doors dash frames, doors dash leaves, doors dash swings. And what I'm going to do, and I only have to do this once because these are instances of the same component. Usually you want to do this before you start copying things. But I'm going to take this door leaf and I'm going to put it on doors leaves. I'm going to put the swing on door swings and the frame on door frames like this. But there's one more thing I want to do, which is I want to take these 2 doors and I want to put them in a group. So I'm going to select them both by doing a shift click, or a control click. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on make group and I'm going to label this group doors. And then this overall doors group, I'm going to put it on a tag called doors dash overall. Now I can toggle on and off all of the individual parts and pieces associated with these doors, which can get really important if you try to take this into layout. But I'm going to do the same thing for my pocket doors. So for my pocket doors, they're going to be a little bit different, only in the sense that they're still going to have the frame. And one thing you could do, by the way, is you could just select these 3 pieces and offset this in 2 inches instead of doing the trick that I did with the move function earlier. But in this case, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to push pull this back. I'm going to take this whole thing, put it in a group. We're going to call it, actually we want to make it a component, and we're going to call it door dash 3 foot by 7 foot dash pocket because it's a pocket door. And so within this pocket door, we're going to do the same thing, right? Except we're not really going to have a swing in a pocket door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this frame and put it in a group. We'll call it frame. And then we'll model out our door leaf, which in this case is a little bit different. So because we have to model it in the middle of the door. So I'm just going to draw a line that's 1 inch here. Draw a line that's 2 inches here so that we're centered. And then we're just going to close this in. And then we're going to push pull it up. Whoops. There we go. To the height of our door. And I'm just going to triple click on it. I'm going to make it a group and we'll call it door leaf. And we want to make sure that we're tagging those. So we'll put our door on the door leaf. We'll put our frame on the frames like this. And what I might do for a pocket door is I might slide this back so that it's like halfway into this opening like this. And then we could go ahead and we could rename this one something like D03 right here. And one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that this is actually within that doors group. You can actually click and drag it in the outliner into the doors group. But notice how now I've got all my doors in here with names. And in this situation, I'm going to take this door and I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode to create a copy over here. And in this case, this needs to go the other direction. So we're just going to use the flip tool and then we can go ahead and align it with our opening. But as long as the openings are the same size, it's actually really fast to just reuse doors like this. So we'll call this one D04. And then in this case, I'm not getting especially crazy with my front and rear entry doors, though you might model out a different leaf in those. But in this case, I'm just going to make a copy right here. We'll take this and I'm going to use the rotate tool in order to rotate it. And then we'll align it with our opening. Again, making sure that we're renaming this door instance so that we don't have the same number or same door number. Like this. And then we'll do the same thing over here. We can use the flip tool in order to flip it. And then we can just align it with our opening like this. And we'll call this D06. And so one thing that you could do, depending on how detailed you're trying to get, is if you ever did have like a trim profile or something like that, you could add trim to these doors as well, to these door objects. So like if I wanted to add trim to D01, and I'm just going to do something simple. So just like a 1.5 inch piece right here. And I'm just going to do something simple. So say I've got like a 3.5 inch casing right here, which might be a little bit big. I'm not really sure, but we'll call it good for right now. Let's say that you did have a piece of casing like this. What you could do within your door is you could triple click on it. You could make this a group in here, and we could call this door casing. But then we could put that on a tag as well. So doors dash casings. And I really like setting up your objects so that you can toggle everything on and off. So if you don't want it, you don't need it. So I really like putting all of those on layers because that can get really helpful when you start working in layout. Now, one thing that got a little funky with this though is notice how your interior doors have this casing, but your exterior probably aren't going to have the same casing, right? So probably what we would want to do in this situation is we would want to take this back door and this front door. We would want to right click on them and we would want to make them unique. So that's going to break the link between these two objects and these two objects. So if I make them unique, notice how they get renamed over here. And in this case, I might change that component definition name to 3 foot by 7 foot entry. Like this. But notice how now I've got these two doors are instances of a component, but the others are not. But then for these, I could come in here and I could delete out that casing, right? Because I don't want that in those two doors right here, but I do want it in these two doors. So you can add parts and pieces to your doors in this fashion. But then I would want to do the same thing for my windows here. And there's a couple ways that you could go about this. So you could model out those windows. You could also download some windows from the 3D warehouse. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. So in this case, we're just going to keep this very simple. So we're just going to draw a rectangle across this front face. I'm going to offset this in. We'll call it 1 inch. And I'm going to delete out this face. And we're just going to use that same kind of method in here, right? I'm going to push pull this back over here. And then I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to put it in a group, or you could call it a component as well. So window, I didn't get the size, so let's go back and look at the size. We can measure it this way. So this is going to be a window 4 foot by 4 foot. So I can just change the definition name right here. But then within that window, I'm going to have the frame. And then let's say we're going to have a slider piece in here, which again, we're going to make very simple. I'm not going to make this super complicated. A lot of the time I do recommend that you go onto the warehouse and download like a Marvin window or a Pella window or something like that, because they've already got this all set up. But I'm just going to offset this in by 1 inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to split this. So I can right click on this edge and divide it like this, and then I've got kind of a guide point in here. And so I'm probably going to put these window sliders in a group as well. And notice how, again, I'm just kind of grouping everything to keep the geometry from merging together. So in this case, I'm going to take this and I'm going to push pull it out by whatever I think this thickness is going to be. So maybe 1 inch is fine in this situation. I'm not really trying to get the exact dimensions of a window, but then for each one of these, right, what I can do is I can offset this in by a little bit and I can model out the glass. And so in this situation, because they're going to be repeating, I'm actually going to delete out this face, and I'm just going to model one of these and then just repeat it. So I'll push pull this to the thickness I want. In this situation, I'm probably going to take this face and I'm just going to copy it to the middle right here using the move tool, and then I'll delete the face on the back. But then I'll just make this a component and I'll just call this window piece. I know there's a more technical name for it, but I'm fine with this particular, with that naming convention. But then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these and repeat them. So I'll just use the move tool in copy mode again. We'll type in ×2. We'll create a copy right here, but then we can take this piece and we're going to create a copy like this. So now we've got our window out here, and you could come in here and you could apply things like materials. Notice how the nice thing about this is because I modeled these with components, if I make a change to one, it's going to adjust the others as well. But I'm just going to add a glass material right here and we're good to go. And then I can just use this. I can just use the move tool in copy mode to create copies for whatever openings are going to be the same size. Now, obviously, if you have openings that aren't the same size, you'd have to model other pieces, but in this case, we kept it pretty simple. And so what we're going to do with this is we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to call this W01, W02, W03, and so on. And what we want to do is we want to do that same thing that we did with our doors, where we want to put these on a tag. And so if we look in our outliner right now, I've got multiple different windows in here. Well, I'm going to take all those windows, right click, and put them in a group, and we're just going to call it windows right here. And we can put a tag on here that's just windows, and we'll just tag this windows right here. And in this case, I don't really see any reason to put these sliders on their own tags because I can't think of a time when I would actually need to use that. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the move tool in copy mode to copy the rest of these like this. And we're going to make sure that we name them, right? So this one's going to be window 04. This one's going to be window 05. This. And so now within our model, we've got our doors and frames, and we've got our windows ready to go. And the cool thing about the way that we modeled these is if we do decide to take this over into layout, if I take a section cut across this building, right here, and I'm going to turn parallel projection on under camera parallel projection. But if I go into a top view like this, and I'm going to toggle that section plane off, and I'm going to hide this graphic. Notice how the way that this cuts through those windows and those doors makes them look really good for like a CAD file. So basically what that means is that this is set up where we can take this to layout and generate plans using the windows that we've created. All right, so that should give you a pretty good idea of how to add your doors and windows. In the next video, we might go through and talk about how to put this in layout so that you can actually create those two-dimensional plans. Now, if you want more in-depth training on how to do things like this, make sure you check out my course. I will link to that on this page. That's a great place to not only get some great instruction, but also get help in our live calls and in our community forum. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.